When I was young and reckless, I used to drink pretty heavily sometimes. I have no idea how it was that I never got pulled over. Because there were many nights when I ended up in the parking lot of my apartment complex and had no idea how I got there. One night, I was so drunk that I tripped and fell on the railroad track as I staggered back to my car. I tried to get up, but I couldn't keep my balance and just flopped down between the wooden ties and rocks like a freshly caught trout. About the time I was thinking of just sleeping right there, I was suddenly enveloped by a bright light and heard a train whistle. I looked up and saw a giant engine coming at me, signaling my imminent doom. In a panic, I tried again and again to get up, but I couldn't. I finally regained enough control of my body to crawl away about 10 seconds before I was crushed by its steel wheels. Later that night, when I sobered up, I made a promise to myself. Never get drunk again. No. I didn't go to AA. I didn't go through any 12-step programs, and I didn't quit drinking. From that night on, I just drank responsibly. I never got drunk or even a little drunk again. Going out with the guys, I'd have 1 or 2 beers all night. On dates, I might have a glass of wine, but that was it. I'm still the same way today. I haven't had a high like that in over a decade. That's why I was surprised one night when my wife, Cora, and 2 of our friends, Brad and Susie Cunningham, seemed to be trying to get me drunk. I suspected there was some kind of bet going on. Someone was betting that they could get me drunk and someone was betting against them. I hoped my wife was the latter. We could always use a little extra money. The evening started out quite normally. 2 days before, Cora had informed me that she had invited the Cunninghams over for dinner. I wouldn't call them our best friends, but we had known each other for a few years and met up from time to time. Cora and I were still in the kitchen when she saw the headlights of their car hit the panoramic window in the living room as they turned into the driveway. "Honey, could you get the roast out of the oven while I go greet them?" Cora asked, untying the bow behind her apron. "Sure, honey, you go let them in, and I'll be there in a minute." I put on a pair of oven mitts and heard the muttering of the usual welcoming jokes coming from the hallway as I pulled the roaster out of the oven. I set it on the stove and checked to make sure everything was ready. I was on my way to the cheerful threesome when everything suddenly quieted down. As I rounded the corner, I thought I caught some whispering between the 3 of them. Of course, I had no reason to be suspicious yet. Hey, there will be no secrets in this house?" I joked. My hilarious comment seemed to take them all by surprise. "Hey, buddy," Brad replied, bouncing back first. "Hi, Steve," Susie interjected before I could answer her husband. She reached over and kissed my cheek while Cora hung their coats in the hall closet. "Hey, what does a guy have to do to get a drink here?" Brad barked as we shook hands. Now I was a little puzzled. We'd barely said hello, and he was already pestering me for a drink. I was beginning to wonder if they already had a couple before they came in. "Just follow me," I replied. They all followed me into the study and took seats while I played host and prepared the drinks. I handed Cora and Susie each a glass of white wine. Brad was a vodka and martini drinker. I didn't need to ask if he ever changed his drink. I would have fainted. I opened the lid of my light beer just before handing Brad his martini. "Why don't you make one for yourself and join me?" "No. I'll stick with what I have," I replied. Beer. He muttered. "You're no fun to be with. Come on, Steve Areno. Be a man today. Make yourself a real drink," he said, raising his martini to illustrate. "A real drink." Much to my surprise, Cora intervened. "Yes, honey, I don't think I've ever seen you with anything but beer before. Why don't you join Brad?" I looked at my wife dazedly. We'd never really talked about why I didn't drink much. I wasn't proud of the way I got smashed. Unlike some, I never considered drinking as one of life's major accomplishments, so I never discussed it with Cora. I didn't try to hide it from her. It just never came up in conversation. However, after 7 years of marriage, you would think she would know that I don't drink to get drunk. Her comment was my first hint that something was going on. Whatever it was It must have been what they were whispering about when they first walked in. That meant all three of them were in on it. My mind immediately went into search mode. What could they be planning? It must have something to do with my drinking or lack thereof. I came to the only conclusion that came to my mind. A bet. Since no one had ever seen me drunk before, I was sure that Brad had bragged that he could get me drunk, and Cora had probably bet him that he couldn't. But why was she encouraging me to drink? Maybe she just wanted to make sure Brad and Susie couldn't accuse her of cheating when it came time to pay up. Or maybe it was Susie who was betting in my favor. Maybe later, I said. It all seemed so strange. I needed time to think it over. I was beginning to really question whether my wife was in my corner at dinner when she tried to give me another beer before I was even half done with the first one. I decided the only way to figure out what the hell was going on was to play along, but how? I couldn't pour my beer down the drain and say I drank it. Too conspicuous, so I came up with a plan. After dinner, we all retreated to the living room. Cora and the Cunningham took their seats, and I headed to the bar. Another martini, Brad. Is the Pope shitting in the woods? I guess that's a yes. I replied to the rude remark. You know, maybe I'll have a drink with you. I'll make a picture. I watched carefully as everyone looked over and smirked. It was then that I guessed that maybe they were all trying to get me drunk just to see if they could. That was all I could think of. Well, the joke would be on them. I was going to play it to the end. While everyone was talking and not paying attention to me, I prepared 2 pitchers, one with martinis and one with lemon water. If I put it in the martini glass and dropped an olive in it, no one would know anything. I put the martini on the counter and the other pitcher on the shelf behind the counter. As long as no one saw me pouring them, I was free. I brought another glass of white wine for each of the ladies and then went back for the martinis. Holding out his glass to Brad, I felt the stares of everyone present as I took a sip from mine. I wished I could start acting drunk immediately, but obviously they'd never buy it, so I had to stay calm for a while and let myself slowly become intoxicated. As we sat and talked, it didn't take me long to drain my glass. I stood up and walked over to the bar. Brad, another one. No. Thanks, Steve. I have some more, but you go ahead. Making sure no one was watching, I poured more lemon water, added an olive, and joined the group. I didn't want it to look obvious, so I spent a little more time on it. After another 20 or 30 minutes of conversation, Cora asked for more white wine. Yeah. Me too. Susie said, you could make another round for all of us divers. Brad added. Once again, I poured drinks all around. I'd only had 1 beer so far, but everyone thought I'd had 3 martinis on top of that. It was time to start showing some effects. I deliberately started talking a little slower, even stopping a couple times to gather my thoughts. Over the next hour, I had 2 more against everyone else's 1. By then, I had let my eyelids droop and slurred my speech. For a few minutes, I just sat in silence, shaking my head up and down. I needed to make it believable, so I struggled to get to my feet, staggered over to the bar, and poured myself another one, then recoiled and plopped down on a chair. I finished it in 3 gulps before I finally closed my eyes and let my chin fall to my chest. That's where I stayed. I heard Susie's voice first. Had he fallen asleep? Cora started shaking my shoulder. Honey, are you okay? He blacked out like a light. I heard Brad's voice. I knew I could get him drunk under the table. I am not sure this is going to work. Cora said. Of course, it'll work, honey. When he wakes up tomorrow thinking we had sex together, he'll feel guilty as hell. You know him. He'll be devastated. That didn't sound like any kind of bet to me. I sat perfectly still and listened. That's the thing, Susie. I just can't do that to him. Come on, Cora. I heard Brad's voice say. You can't back down now after all this. No way. Yeah, Cora. Come on. So far, the plan has worked perfectly. Later tonight, we'll take some of Brad's cum and smear it all over Steve's cock. He'll never know it wasn't his. He'll be completely convinced that we had sex. Once he thinks we've already slept together, Brad is convinced that he can only talk him into swapping again the next time he's sober. We talked about this, Cora. Yeah. I know, but talking about it and actually doing it are two different things. Okay. The only decision I had to make was whether I wanted to fight for my marriage or dump Cora on her ass. Her voice sounded like she was backing down. I could give her the benefit of the doubt, just open my eyes and stop everything in its tracks. The problem was I always wondered if she'd go through with it. That little unanswered question will haunt me until the day I die, so I'm going to pretend a little longer and see what she's going to do. If she decides to go any further, I'll throw her out along with the other two. I noticed someone getting up from the couch and then I heard Brad's voice. Come on, let's go carry him upstairs. I'll take him by the shoulders. Susie grabbed his legs. Come on, Cora. Help us. Brad grabbed me under my arms. I was about to end it all when Cora's panicked voice gave me new hope. Stop. No. No, I can't do this. I must be crazy to agree to this. Cora, we know, Brad. No, I'm not gonna cheat on Steve. He's a good husband. I love him, and I'm not gonna risk losing him. Cora, you won't lose him, Susie countered. He can't blame you for sleeping with Brad if he thinks he slept with me. I don't care, Cora replied firmly. I don't care. I'm not going to let that happen. I think you guys should leave. Brad started to argue. Damn it, Cora. Cora said to leave. Now get out of my house, you bastard, and take your whore wife with you, I yelled, jumping up from the couch, surprising everyone, and don't ever come in here and talk to me or Cora again. Oh my God. Cora exclaimed, clamping her hand over her mouth. All three of them nearly jumped out of their skin. Brad thought he could talk himself out of it. We were just kidding, old buddy. We knew you were faking it. Brad, if you're not out of this house by the time I count to 3, I swear you and I will do it. 1, alright. Alright. Come on, Susie. Let's go. I looked at my wife, whose fear showed as salty drops of moisture dripped from her eyes and ran down her cheeks. If you wanna go with them, go right now. You can fuck Daryl Brad anytime you want. I growled. No. No. She said, shaking her head. Please, Steve. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I would never have gone for this. But you did talk about it, didn't you? She knew I'd heard every word they said, and she couldn't deny it. She just looked at me, begging for mercy with her weeping eyes. Have you had sex with them before? No. No. Never. I swear, she exclaimed firmly. For a few seconds, I stood there staring at her. Her whole body was literally shaking. If I hadn't been listening to the conversation, I wouldn't have believed her, but from what I heard, it sounded like it was their first connection. I still hadn't decided if our marriage was going to last or not. What was so important about switching partners with them? Do you have feelings for Brad? No. Not at all. It's I don't know. Susie and I were talking one day and the whole conversation just kind of developed. Next thing I know, she said Brad was talking about swapping partners. And you agreed to that? It was a statement, not a question. Well, not right away. I said you'd never agree to it. Then Brad hatched the plan. Susie and I talked about it a few more times. Hell, it seems like every time we get together, that's all we talk about. So it's Susie? You wanna have sex with Susie? No, Steve. It's not. What then? I asked, raising my voice. I'm trying to figure out what the hell would make you do something like that. I saw her face crinkle at the direct question. I have to tell you, Cora, right now, I'm fighting with myself to keep this marriage alive. You have no idea how badly you let me down tonight. I keep asking myself how a wife who claims to love her husband could be scheming behind his back like that. You said it yourself. If your plan had worked, I would have been devastated to think I had deceived you. It's not something you only realized tonight. It's something you knew all along while you were planning your dirty little betrayal. It's what you were counting on. Regardless of the circumstances, you knew how guilty I would feel and you were going to use that guilt against me. That broke the curse. Cora burst into tears, covering his face with his hands. I'm not made of stone. As angry and hurt as I was, I didn't enjoy seeing her like this. Some part of me wanted to hug her and comfort her, but a bigger part of me saw her pain as a small measure of justice. I wasn't going to hug her, but I didn't want to stand there and watch her cry either. So I turned around, went back into the kitchen, and grabbed a beer from the fridge. It was a good 10, maybe 15 minutes before Cora pulled herself together and joined me at the kitchen table. She had washed her face in the bathroom sink, a rolled-up napkin in her hand. She raised her head and looked at me from across the table. It seemed like she wanted to say something, but just couldn't utter it. I waited a few moments, but I had questions I needed answered. When it didn't look like she was going to volunteer anything, I started again. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think about the answer before you just blurt it out. She rubbed the corner of her eye with her napkin and nodded. Do you still love me? I mean, like you used to. Do you still love me as much as you did when we first got married, or have you lost it? Have I lost it? I don't have to think, Steve. Yes, I still love you as much today as I did when we first got married. Maybe even more. Then why, Cora? I guess I just never thought we'd actually do anything. It was just something like a fantasy, something naughty, kinky, something fun to think about and talk about. When Brad said he could get you drunk, I remember thinking, yeah, this is going to be the day. In all the time we've known each other, I've never once seen you drunk. When Brad came up with his plan, the three of us talked. It was exciting, but deep down, I knew it would never happen. Then why did you try so hard to make it happen? You almost challenged me to have a martini with Brad. You tried to buy me another beer at dinner. You looked like you were trying to do that. I know I did. I don't know. I guess some part of me wanted to see if we could really do it, but I would never go for it, Steve. Honestly, when it came to me what we were really going to do, there was no way I was going to do that to you. You have to believe that, Steve. I really love you. I could never hurt you like that. She sobbed. I think the pain of betrayal has almost blocked that part of my mind. She didn't go through with it. When it came down to it, she backed off. That's the only reason I haven't walked out the door yet. So I think I would have come full circle. I had the same decision to make as I did an hour ago. I needed to think about it, maybe talk to someone. This could very well be the biggest decision of my life. Cora, I think we need a couple days away from each other. I'm going to check into a motel where I can be alone for a while and think. Steve, please don't do this. I'll give you some space. I'll be quiet, and I won't bother you, but I need you to be with me. No. I need time to really look at our marriage. Truly loving spouse would go behind her husband's back and plan something like this. You said it was fun and exciting. That's what worries me, Cora. Even if you didn't go for it, how could it be fun to plan such a betrayal against the person you love? No. I'm not buying it. I've tried to put myself in your shoes. I would never plot to hurt you even if I didn't intend to. It wouldn't give me any pleasure to come up with a plan behind your back, and I sure as hell wouldn't find it amusing. Cora was sobbing so hard. I wasn't sure she even heard what I'd said. I needed to get out of there. I gathered some things and went back to the kitchen with my suitcase in my hand. She was trying hard not to cry. I think she wanted to try again to talk me into staying, but I wasn't going to give her that chance. I told Cora I'd call her in a day or two and left. I had every intention of checking into one of the many motels in the area, but as I headed toward the motel row, I had another thought. I was originally from a small town in Indiana, about 80 miles from where I now lived. My mom had died a couple years ago, but my dad still lived in the house I grew up in. I always thought he was a pretty smart guy. I changed my route and pointed the car toward the expressway. Even with little traffic, the winding county roads in Indiana were slowing me down. I was so busy with my own problems that I didn't even think about the time. When I pulled into Dad's driveway, There were no lights on in the house. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket and checked. It was almost 2 in the morning. I wasn't sure what I was going to do and was about to decide I was going to sleep in the car until morning when I saw the lights come on. A couple minutes later, the porch light came on. By the time I got to the door, he had already opened it. "Son," he said, shocked. "What's going on? Someone got hurt?" "Cora." "No. Not really, Dad. Physically, she's fine, but well, we've had some problems. I wanted to talk to you, but I'm really tired. Is it okay if I sleep here tonight?" "Sure," he replied. "You know where it is?" We both went to bed. I didn't realize how tired I was. Between the stress and the long drive, I think I fell asleep before my head even touched the pillow. The first I remembered after I laid down was the smell of fresh coffee the next morning. Dad had already showered and dressed when I followed my nose into the kitchen. He was waiting for me at the breakfast table. I stumbled over to the counter, grabbed a cup from the cabinet, and poured myself some Colombian before joining him. "Dad, how did you know I came here late last night?" It was downright creepy. We were having some trouble with the kids in the neighborhood. They were shooting out car and house windows with shotguns. I guess I was sleeping with my ear open and didn't even realize it. "I heard you pull up before I even turned off the engine." I just shook my head. For as long as I can remember, there's always been a gang of local hooligans causing trouble of one sort or another. Of course, there was a time when I was probably considered one of them. "Are you ready to tell me why my son ended up in my driveway at 2 in the morning? It was my father. Right to the point." I nodded my head and took a sip of black gold. "Cora and a couple friends tried to do something to me last night that I just can't believe she did something like that." He didn't say anything. Just waited for me to continue. "She and a married couple, we know, tried to get me drunk. The plan was to make me think I had sex with another woman. I assumed they would try to use this to convince me to switch. Why was it something Cora was agreeing to?" He tried. I sat down and told Dad the whole story. How I thought it was a bet at first, how I faked fainting, why Cora said she did what she did, all of it. "So really thought you'd passed out when she announced the end of everything?" "Yeah. I have no doubt she really thought I was drunk. I put on a good show." "Well, I can certainly see your frustration with her," he said with a sigh. "What are you going to do about it?" "I don't know. That's why I came here to talk to you. I just find it so hard to believe that she would take any pleasure in plotting against me like this. I guess I wonder if someone who really loves you could do it." I could almost see the wheels turning in his head as Dad stood up and poured himself another cup of coffee. He was still in thought when he came back and sat down again. Had she ever done anything like this before? No. This was completely unexpected. "As far as you know, she's never cheated on you. Right?" "That's right. You know me, Dad, I believe in fidelity. I would never tolerate cheating." He was still thinking. "Do you have any idea how many second chances you've been given in your life, son? So you think I should give her a second chance?" He took a sip of his newly poured drink. "People aren't perfect, Steve. We all have our flaws. I remember when you were younger, your mother and I were so worried about you drinking. We talked to you a couple times, but it didn't seem to help. Every once in a while, we would get messages from friends or neighbors who saw you so drunk you could barely walk. Your mother and I felt so helpless. But you were old enough to be responsible for your actions, and we couldn't lock you in your room. We were sure you would end up either in jail or in a funeral home, but you did neither. One day you just seemed to straighten up. It was a real miracle to your mom and me. You can't imagine the relief we both felt. I have no idea what happened that turned your life so upside down, but I have a suspicion it had something to do with some kind of second chance. Now, of course, second chances don't always work out. Some people let it pass them by without taking advantage of it. Some like you use it to turn their lives around. It's up to the individual to determine what's going on. Unfortunately, there are many people who never got a second chance. What a shame. I think everyone deserves that opportunity, If they blow it, they only have themselves to blame for the consequences, but I wonder how much better the world would be if everyone had a second chance. I sat there and remembered that night on the tracks. I could still feel the fear I experienced when I looked up and saw my imminent death looming over me like that. I wonder if Cora felt the same fear when she saw the doom of our marriage bearing down on her. Would it frighten her the way it frightened me? "How long will you be here, son?" My father interrupted my train of thought. Well, I was going to stay for the week, but now I think it's time for me to come home soon, Dad. I hope you don't mind." "Not at all," he replied with a smile. We sat down and talked some more about other things. A little later, I helped him with some yard work, but I was heading home that afternoon. I kept thinking about what my dad had said about second chances. If she hadn't spoken up when she did it and ended it all, I wouldn't have even considered it. But she did. However, it will be a while before I fully trust her again. Until then, I will remain vigilant. As I walked in, I was surprised to hear music coming from the study, so much for her sitting home alone and crying just as I had imagined. I startled her when I appeared in the doorway. She looked up and I saw her breath catch. I'm not sure what I expected to see. The music must have thrown me off. She was standing behind the ironing board, ironing one of my shirts and hanging 4 or 5 more. What the hell? I was going crazy out here all alone. "I didn't know when you were coming home or if you were coming home," she said, with sadness in her voice. I had to do something to try and take my mind off of my thoughts. The music helped, but I know. I felt closer to you by ironing some of your shirts. She looked at me expectantly. She was waiting for me to announce the fate of our marriage. The anxiety on her face was hard to miss. I could see her literally holding her breath. "I can't tell you how disappointed I am in you that you might find this exciting or even find any pleasure at all, and conspiring against me in any way just makes me cringe. Steve, I'm sorry. I know you're apologizing." "I know," I said, interrupting her. "I didn't need to be any more. I'm sorry. You and I have never really discussed what we expect from each other regarding fidelity. I didn't think we'd have to do that. I always assumed you felt the same way I did. Now I'm wondering if you might be a little more relaxed about this topic than I am." I spent the night with my father. He asked me a question which I immediately answered to the best of my knowledge. But on the way home, I began to wonder, see, that's the problem with opening Pandora's box, Cora. It's like a judge who once took a bribe and got caught. Every case he ever ruled on is then called into question. People suspect that other decisions he has made in the past may have been the result of another bribe. My father asked me if you ever cheated on me. I said no. But now I'm not so sure anymore. Never. She objected firmly. "Steve, I've never done anything with another man that I wouldn't do in front of you. I swear. I'll swear on the Bible in front of our pastor. I'll swear. I'll take a lie detector test. I'll do anything you suggest." "Well, a lie detector is a possibility. I'll have to think about it. In the meantime, our marriage is on very shaky ground, Cora. I've lost not only trust, but respect for you. It's going to be up to you to get both back if you want this marriage to last. Do you?" Now she was crying again. You mean, do I want this to go on?" "Yes. Of course, I do. Steve, I will never do anything like this again in my life. You're not the only one who's lost respect. I've lost respect for myself. Well, then consider this your second chance at a happy marriage. There won't be a third, so I pray you do your best." "I will, Steve." And she did. She worked hard to regain my trust and respect. Some of us are lucky enough to face the unexpected consequences of our actions and get a second chance to redeem ourselves. I am one of those lucky ones. Cora is another. Brad and Susie were less fortunate. 7 months after our incident, I heard they were getting a divorce. I don't know why. I don't care. Neither Cora nor I ever spoke to them again.